All right, so then I think what we want to do is set him up for him. Hi. I will mute myself so you don't have to hear me working out these details. Hey everyone, we're just about ready to go. We have a little last fiddling to do, but hopefully right now you are seeing the slideshow and then you're about to see beside it. Oh, there he is, Walter Nash. Walter, whenever you're ready, I think we can get started.
Okay, perfect. Welcome everyone. So rainy Sunday, congregational meeting. I appreciate you guys taking the time to be here. Okay, can we have the first slide, please? All right, the first thing is going to be our agenda. As you can see, I'm not going to read it. You can go ahead and look at it, 1 through 9. All right, so before I get going, so first of all, I want to say this. So unless there are any objections to this agenda, we will approve the agenda as presented in that slide. Throughout the meeting, if you do have an objection or a question, please raise your hand using the Zoom interface or type a comment into the chat. All right, and before we get even further, I need to introduce Chris Hutchinson. He is acting as our parliamentarian. The one thing I've learned about being Unitarian Universalist is that trying to herd UUs is like herding cats. So we need some help at times. So Chris, would you please tell us what you're up to and what you're going to be doing for us?
Sure. And I know this is a little bit early on the agenda. My role is to support effective meetings. And as part of that, one thing that I wanted to share is when we get into situations where we are going to be something emotions on the floor, it's been seconded and we're into conversation, there's frequently people will say, hey, let's call the question. And what they're trying to do is say, look, we're ready to vote. The way that works is that we then vote on whether or not we want to suspend debate, or actually stop debate. And so I just want to let people know that Walter, as our chair, is going to have the authority to see if conversation's done, and he can ask us to vote at that point. Nobody has to call the question. If you feel we're dragging on and the point's made, you're welcome to call the question. If you're seconded, we stop the meeting, we get a 2/3 majority, and then we vote, or we find out we need to keep talking. So that's just one part where I think in the spirit of hearing from the few and making sure that the many are the ones that get to decide. That's the way parliamentary procedure works. And as part of our Unitarian ethos, I'll be doing that in support of that. And I'm really looking forward to the meeting. So Walter, back to you.
Thank you very much. And yeah, please understand that you have full permission to interrupt if we're getting wildly off course, because I'm not as skilled in this area as you are. Okay, now we're going to do the chalice lighting. We light this chalice. We notice our breath. We bring our attention to the wisdom within you, within me. We reflect, we decide. We do the next right thing. Okay. Next slide, please. Here's our standing rules. Members shall abide by the Foothills Covenant of Right Relations. No member shall speak more than once in a debate on the same question until all members wishing to speak have done so. No member shall speak more than twice in debate on the same question. Comments made in debate shall be limited to a maximum of 2 minutes. Any motions to amend must be submitted to the president on Zoom or to the moderator before the motion is made. So if you have an amendment, you can actually just put it into Zoom. Unless there are any objections, we will approve the standing rules as presented in this slide. Okay, seeing no objections, standing rules are approved. Okay, next thing on our agenda is the approving of the minutes of the meeting of December 22, 2022. If you folks have had a chance to look at the packet, you could have looked at the meeting minutes. And unless there are any corrections, we will approve the minutes of the December 2022 meeting as affirmed by the Board of Trustees and presented in the Congregational meeting packet. Okay, seeing no corrections, we will consider these minutes final and approved. Okay, President's report. That's me. So one of the things we like to do, we see this in every June meeting, is we kind of look back over the past year and things that the board has been doing and the church has been doing and can report on that. So the board has had three major goals this past year. To get the bylaws completed with feedback from the congregation and on the agenda for a vote at this meeting. And that's done. We're here. I really want to have special thanks to Brian Woodruff and his team, Sue Sullivan, Doug Powell, and all the previous board members who have worked so hard on this over the years. The second thing that we worked on was the alignment of board policy and board monitoring that would align with these new bylaws, which would take effect at the time of approval by you, the congregation. And that's done as well. Also, I want you to know that these will all be on our website at foothillsuu.org/governance. So anytime you care to take a peek at all those things, and you can and you should. The last of the three major goals we had is what's called linkage. And it's a linkage to sources of accountability and authority. And really, to make this easy to understand, this is a process of linking to the future by the board by getting feedback from our sources, individuals and groups that the church has relationships with, so that we can better solidify that relationship moving forward, finding out what they really need and want, and so that we can work together more effectively. And we decided this year to focus on our community partners. And this would be our nonprofits that share our values. And every time you come to church and we do the share the plate, the people that we're sharing the plate with are our community partners. The thing that we found that we have in common, really, since 2020, is the devastating effect the pandemic has had on all these organizations. And that's mostly economics, right? It's been tough. Foothills has also shared in those economic challenges. We've lost members during the pandemic. We've had increased inflation and the continuing process of our building expansion. So the board approved the first pledge drive and fundraising campaign since before the pandemic. The board also acted as the de facto stewardship team during this campaign, as we didn't have an active stewardship team at that time. So really, I want to thank all of you, as we are in a much better position financially. I don't want to steal the thunder of the senior minister, because she's going to talk more about that, but I am very pleased to tell you up front that we are in a much, much better position. And lastly, and this is like the best part, I think, is we do have a new construction going on. It's been very exciting. I love seeing the changes. It's thrilling, and I'm really looking forward to working and being in that new sanctuary and seeing all of you. Okay, next slide.
Just take 1 second to get it back up.
Oh yeah, thank you. So we're going to be, the next thing here is really the outgoing leaders. So first of all, I really want to read something that I composed having to do about board work, board of trustee work. I've learned a lot since being on the board and of course being board president. And I just want to share that because I think it's important. So in wanting to serve this great group that we all believe in, we accept the calling to be on the board. And while struggling with the awesome responsibility of lay leadership and accountability to you, the congregation, we also revel in the close bonds that form between the other board members and the senior minister. After all is said and done, I believe that we are all the better for it, and encourage anyone who might perceive a calling in this way to speak to Gretchen, the nominating committee or board member, or myself, because we are always looking for qualified members every year. We have some great members that are going to be joining us after they are been voted in. I assume that's going to be true. And I also want to tell you that this experience will change you. In fact, pretty much anything that you do with this church having to do with groups is going to change you. June 30 marks the end of the Foothills Board of Trustees year. And so this month we say goodbye to board members and friends who have completed their service. And we get ready to welcome new members whose positions will be subject to a vote of approval at this meeting. We will certainly miss the light and wisdom that board members Andrea Delorey and Joan Woodbury have brought to our meetings. Their thoughtful contributions and leadership cannot be overstated. We will miss you, and thank you for your service. Next up is going to be ministry.
Mute myself. Hello. Thanks, Walter. I realized as you were thinking, Joan and Andrea, that we have one other leader that I forgot to mention as you and I were talking, and we're going to hear from her at the end of this meeting, which is Susan McQuitty, who's been chairing our nominating committee. She's finishing her term. So also want to say thank you to Susan, and especially during the pandemic, appreciate the work to keep finding us wonderful leaders to serve the church. Okay, so with that, I'm going to go into my report, which I actually want to start with a little bit of, this is something I'm assuming you might be curious about. We'll see. But I received some information in the last couple of weeks that I felt like I wanted to share with you, which is the result of a 5-year study that began in 2021, sponsored by the Lilly Foundation and I said foundation, it should be Lilly Endowment, and that has been speaking to thousands of congregations, including 530 UU congregations, about the impact of the pandemic on congregational life. They have just come out with their first round of feedback about what they heard and distilling some of that data. So I wanted to share just a little bit about what they're seeing. I want to thank and acknowledge Jen Crow, my colleague at First Universalist Minneapolis, who helped distill some of this information for our UU ministers to share. So the first thing, that the biggest overarching theme that they're seeing, which is not a shock, I don't think, to any of us, is that congregations are on fluid ground still. They were during the pandemic and they still are. Lots is still up in the air. A lot has changed and a lot is going to keep changing. What it means to be connected to and engaged with a community of any kind, including a spiritual community, is really in flux because people's lives are still in flux. So that means we need to keep articulating a compelling why for our community, because people are asking the question themselves. Maybe some of you have been asking yourself just that question of, what is my relationship to this congregation? How has that shifted? How do I want it to be? Okay, next slide. Some of the highlights so far is, first of all, I think this is not a surprise to anybody, but it's not just us. COVID has catalyzed a lot of changes in worship, in religious education, in creative building use, and in use of technology. So it really kicked off a period of a lot of change. In those changes, people are identifying the most successful adaptation that churches have made were in two areas. First, online worship, which in most cases didn't exist at all in congregations before, or existed minimally like it did with ours. So that was a big adaptation that was really successful. And then secondly, using the online space for care and connection, which people have really, one of the big changes that was noted is an increase in how much care and spiritual support was needed within communities. However, on the other side, the hardest hit, the most impacted, and yet success didn't have as much success in adaptation was in the ministry for families, children, and youth. A number of Unitarian Universalist congregations, if you know, if you have friends in other U churches, you may be hearing that they are reducing their staff for religious education right now in their annual meetings because there has just been such a significant shift in attendance. We lost a lot of families. We did too during the pandemic. And for a lot of congregations, they haven't come back. Okay, that's next slide. A couple more highlights. In the report, they're seeing that membership and belonging is in flux in a lot of congregations. That means that more people are participating virtually, but higher online participation and lower in-person participation also correlates with lower commitment, as in lower giving, lower volunteering, lower small group participation, and a lower sense of belonging and engagement. So that means online is a great way to remain connected, especially for folks who couldn't otherwise participate, but it doesn't usually result in as strong of a connection as in-person participation does. Pandemic led many congregations to a greater role in their community. So an upside of the pandemic meant a greater engagement in the community and greater collaboration with local civic leadership, other congregations, and other nonprofit organizations. And then another highlight is they've identified that many congregations are experiencing increased demands in how they're doing their work. That's what I said about that. More folks needing care and support, and more technological adaptations required, but there are far fewer volunteers than have been present in the past. The percentage of church attenders who regularly volunteered across the congregations that were studied dropped from 44% to 15% in the last 3 years. So that was a really significant shift. And 15% of congregations over this time reduced their staffing. Financially, they've identified it's kind of a mixed picture. There was, for about a third of the congregations, they saw increased giving over the last few years, and a third decreased in their giving, and a third of congregations, of all congregations that were studied, say their financial viability is at risk as a result of the pandemic, and nearly 20% say that their continued existence is threatened. So this you can see some of this in the graph that's here, showing how the pandemic was a major disruption to all religious life. You can see some of the ways that people struggled to adapt to restrictions. The ministry was majorly disrupted, that they struggled to maintain contact with members. And like I said, 30% say their church's financial viability is at risk. So also in the study, what they identified for those congregations that are actually thriving now after all of the pandemic is in two ways. Two things make the biggest difference. One is how congregations are in what their sense of optimism is, and what their willingness has been and continues to be to change. Both of these are things that that they saw as a whole improved in congregational life. Congregations are not generally known for being willing to change. Religious communities are preservers of tradition. That's just part of, even UUs, we are often interested in preserving and conserving. But the pandemic required a lot more change, and those who are willing to change and willing to take that and run with it have a much greater chance of doing well in all the ways right now. Congregations that are thinking in new ways about their vision and mission, that are willing to embrace change, and are identifying ways to innovate and embrace new opportunities for ministry, especially in how they're collaborating with the larger community And those who believe they will emerge stronger than pre-pandemic are now experiencing higher levels of attendance, giving, and a sense of spiritual vitality. So given all that, that's the background and the big study that will continue. We participated in that study, by the way, I should have said that. And we'll continue. They annually survey us. So they'll keep giving reports each year about how things are evolving. So in the midst of that, you might wonder how we are doing. And this is a photo, some of you were there, of our baby blessing in April. Well, I have very encouraging news, which I hope is not a surprise to most of you. The energy at church is very positive, joy-filled. People are very excited about the building and about ministries of all sorts. Small groups and justice teams and new initiatives for belonging. We've had a very strong rebound in attendance. We had like our strongest April since 2016, I think. We had a very strong April in terms of attendance and engagement. We've had strong rebounds in terms of, we've had great giving the first quarter, and our small group and volunteer engagement is really, we've had a bunch of new folks starting to participate more regularly. And this was especially wonderful to see, given that we are only offering 2 services. So thank you all for continuing to show up and showing up online. And also given the state of our very construction impacted building, and especially the past few weeks, our parking lot. Bless you all. Okay, next slide. So just a few high points along the first half of this year. I would describe us as, I picked three adjectives that I felt like really fit where we're at: energized, active, and growing. So I will say the first half of this year has felt to me sometimes like we're all a pot that's about to boil over, and the construction is like the lid that's trying to keep it all contained, because the construction has created very real, very tangible limitations in what we can and can't do. Limitations that sometimes some of you have just been truly unwilling to accept. So for example, the senior potluck last month, many of you were there, and you might have realized we actually had 70 people in attendance, which is a record for the senior potluck. And that's even though we don't even really have a social hall. So that's what I mean about overall, y'all are not willing to totally accept the limitations the construction has put in place for us. Journey groups and sisterhood groups, and the return of a new men's group, my grandmother's hands, Earth-Based Path, a grief group. Those are just naming a few things that I just off the top of my head have been extremely active over the past few months. We've had 3 new major justice efforts take flight in the last few months that were in reproductive justice, immigration justice, teams that are immigration justice expanding beyond our successful Sanctuary Everywhere, and an increasingly active LGBTQ ministry that is especially focused right now on supporting trans individuals who are relocating from other states. I really want to encourage you to please make sure to check all of our communications, including our returned bi-monthly newsletter, including it's available in print for details on all of these. And you can get involved in, if you're curious about those justice efforts, at foothillsuu.org/justice, or any of our many justice initiatives, including to sign up for our next Faith Family Hospitality that starts on the 18th. We have also started a new initiative that many of you heard in the service today, a focus on growing a culture of belonging in our congregation as we gear up for our grand opening of the new building. This became increasingly urgent over the first half of the year, as we had 250 first-time visitors in our first quarter. We are thrilled about that, and especially thrilled that a good portion of this came from you can go to the next slide, the increasing presence of families with younger kids at home and the return of our parents group. We are very happy to not be in the group of you churches that are having to contemplate reduced family ministry staffing. Just if you didn't see it, this is the kids choir on All Music Sunday. Another highlight, by the way, of the past few months, made possible by the very wonderful addition this year of our new music director, Benjamin. So this is all very good news that I'm so glad to share with you. And I want to say thank you, especially to our group leaders and everyone who has really stepped up and pitched in, and with so much joy and generosity, and in big ways and in small ways, often unseen ways. In this is our 125th year as a congregation, and my 11th year here at Foothills, and 7th in this at a ministry partnership that Sean and I have with you. I really feel that our ministry partnership has never felt stronger. And alongside all of that, this good news, there's one little thing I want to note for you guys that I'm curious about and paying attention to. Yeah, next slide. With this many newcomers filling the seats on Sunday and participating in our church, you would expect a huge surge in our overall numbers that would go beyond what we were seeing pre-pandemic, but that is not the case. It's pretty much even to pre-pandemic. And we are thrilled about that rebound of numbers, but we also recognize that about 20% of our members have not yet returned. Some of them, I mean online or in person, since the pandemic began, which we know very clearly because we have been, thank you all, continuing our individual check-ins that we've been doing since March 2020. So we know who hasn't come back. And it is unclear to me what will happen about that. Like the study said, a lot is really in flux. We do regular outreach to folks who we haven't seen in a really long time, and sometimes that does yield some clarity. Often what that clarity is they express intent to return, but just haven't yet. And especially those with children at home. As the study said, the pandemic has had a very serious impact on our children and youth and families. In some ways, I feel like we've had a lot of good momentum about family ministry, like I said, but a lot of that is like we're rebuilding the programs with new kids who are arriving and new families and a sprinkling of some of those who are returning. And it's exciting and we are grateful for that, but we still wonder about the others. I wonder, are some folks waiting for the new building to open, or have habits changed in ways that just won't change back? And then how can we keep creating an experience of belonging for all the people, the folks who do return, so that they can still feel like it's their church, given all the newcomers in the meantime? How do we weave together an overall experience of community that feels that great sense of belonging, like we were exploring this morning? The good news, of course, is that we will have room for them when they make that first return back. Yay. So which brings me to, I'm going to turn things over to Katie to share about our building construction. Yeah, why don't you?
In lieu of our office, we're in my home office today. So Gretchen and I are switching locations. I hope everybody who's here has been had an opportunity to be in the building sometime in the last couple of months. If you haven't, shoot me an email and let me know. We would love to get you in that space. We do have another tour coming up next week that we would love for folks to participate in after church if you haven't gotten a chance, but it is just so exciting to see things coming together. It's looking less like construction where there's, the groundwork, and more like a building, and you can step into the sanctuary especially and just really garner a sense of what will be ours in such a short time. We are very excited to be getting toward the end. We had hoped we would be finished about now, but we're getting much closer to where we know it's coming to the end. I know the BET is quite excited for us to be getting toward the end. And I have a huge gratitude for for that entire team. I just want to remind you all that we have Chris Batlek, Margaret Cottom, Peg McMorris, and Jerry Hanley. There are a lot of people who I know have said to each of them that they thought once the building work started, they would mostly be done. They meet every single week for hours. They have handled complications and challenges, and they've handled them with integrity and intentionality to make sure that we are really delivering what the congregation intended. And I particularly just want to thank Jerry for his hawk-like oversight of our budget. The BET had the foresight to plan for us to have a contingency fund that was built into the costs we approved. And as a result of that, as we are nearing the end of what we hope are any changes, we are on budget. We're even just a little under budget at this point in time. So we're really excited to see that coming up to that end and to feel that relief that we planned appropriately. We've managed challenges to be able to stay where we wanted to be. What you'll notice in the next few months, or in the next, sorry, how far are we? 2 months really. Up until between now and the middle of July, they'll be working on most of the finishes. So we started seeing the stucco go up this last week. That will continue. Countertops, carpet, painting, things are coming to their finished moment. We will be almost finished when they take a break for about a month, mid-July. We have a part that is a part of our all electric HVAC system, the system that allows us to be net zero once we have our solar installed. That particular part, it's a coil, if you understand these things well, has been delayed in its shipment. And so we're waiting. We will have a point where we are done with most of the work and we wait for that to come in, and then they'll come back and do about 3 weeks of work. There are a few things like installing the wood on the stage and the carpet that they want the room to be tempered with that final HVAC in place before we can finish those up. But right now we are planning to be done about August 11th. Between when we have that break, we are planning on having a temporary occupancy so our team can be in there using the space. You can see the space and getting ready for the next stage of really occupying it. So on that one. So just a couple of dates to keep in mind. We were grateful that when we found out we were going to be a little bit delayed, we had planned to give ourselves some time to get ready for the grand opening. So our grand opening plans for the most part stay the same. The one date you might have seen was that we were thinking we would transition a little bit sooner. We will start on August 27th, which is a Sunday, kicking off a 2-week transition period. During that time, we're going to be collecting your memories, and coming together to talk about the meaningfulness of our current space and the role that it's played in so many of our lives. As we begin to make home in our new space, we really want to honor and take time to just reflect on how much has happened in that room that has been our sanctuary for 30 years. How long have we been in there? 30 years-ish.
If you count the old version, since 1970.
Yeah, so it's a big change. We want to take time to honor that. On September 17th, we will have our water ceremony and what we're calling our homecoming, which is our first full ceremony in the new sanctuary, where we are really taking it as our own. And then during that next week, we'll have a couple of events, and on Saturday, we'll have our public grand opening and our ribbon cutting. So the public grand opening, we would love for you to invite your friends and family too. We would love to get as many people in to see this place that you all have played a hand in building, and to share it with the community, because we want it to be a community resource. So mark those, especially the 17th and the 23rd in your calendars. We would love for you to be a part of both of those events. Next slide. We have had a really strong spring overall. The member loan program has gone really well. We collected over $1 million from more than 30 households who are participating. There's still a couple people that I'm working with right now Because of the extended project timeline, we do have the capacity to continue taking member loans. So we have moved that deadline from what you previously saw as June 15th to August 30th. So if you've been thinking about it and you weren't sure if the timeline worked for you, please know there's more time to participate. If we would be able to get to 1.5, it would be a huge help with our long-term finance management. So if you have any questions, feel free to come and find me. I'd love to talk to you about it. Most of the details are on our website at foothillsuu.org/member loans. And then take a look at those and then give me a call. I'm happy to answer any questions that you have. Additionally, I'm really excited to announce that we have a generous offer from one of our members who is matching up to $60,000 of new funds toward the building to help us reach our $1 million fundraising goal. These funds were focused on bringing in folks who haven't yet given or haven't made a pledge to the campaign, and that will be my goal. But new funds that were not previously pledged will all count for this match. So if you've been thinking about giving a little bit extra, I would love to talk to you and help us reach that goal so we make the most of it. With the match in place, we will be over $350,000 towards our $1 million goal of that additional fundraising. And so we're inching closer toward that. We have until the end of 2024. I'll talk about that just in a little bit on our timeline with that. But we're excited to see us keep moving toward where we need to be. The deadline for that match is the grand opening. So between now and when the building opens, and I'll be working this summer to identify folks who are a good fit for that and reaching out to them. We really want to activate some of those folks that Gretchen just mentioned who have come and been a part of us in the last 2 years, but were not here when we did the original launch of the capital campaign. Next one. And then we have had a lot going on the finance side of things. I've been so grateful to have our finance team meeting monthly with me. Thanks to Eric Martinson, Tom Rhodes, Jeff Barnes, and Mary Cleakin, who are all a part of that team. They're incredibly knowledgeable, and I'm so grateful because they ask hard, good questions. And that's exactly what we want them to do. We've been able to get set up with the new third-party accounting firm called Your Part-Time Controller. We call them YPTC for short. They have been wonderful and have asked all of the right questions for the level of support that we need. They're helping us clean up a lot of accounting practices that really we have needed to move up to a next level as we've grown in our budget size over the last few years. And putting us in a place where we have more security, more visibility to the broader sense of our total financial picture. So if you haven't yet, I definitely encourage you to click on the link that was in, I think it was a link or it may have been included in the packet to see the full financial memo that they prepared for the end of the year for 2022. We just finished reviewing the first quarter as well. And overall, we've had a really successful first quarter. Our giving has been really strong. As Walter mentioned, we had a great pledge drive this year. And you can see in this graph here, just some of where we are at. 33% of the year has passed by the end of April, and where we are in terms of our numbers for Share the Plate, donations and pledges. And for both donations and pledges, we've exceeded where we should be by this time of the year. May was a little bit less strong. And so I just want to remind everybody that summer is the time when everybody goes off and does their traveling. And sometimes we see people kind of put pause on paying their pledges during that time. It's a time where we every year go cash negative, and we use our own resources to mend that gap between now and about October when we come back into being positive. So if you have the capacity to give over the summer towards your operating pledge, or you have the ability to help us close some of the gaps we do still have in our planning, this is a great time to give, and it really does make a very significant impact to give at this time. But overall, as Walter said about our just position, I feel so much more resourced to help us manage what we're doing as a result of some of the changes that the board has supported, that you all supported, and getting in these new resources. I think we're one ahead of where.
Yeah, I didn't mean to.
There you go. One of the ways in which we are diversifying our income is through our rental partnerships. So I was so excited yesterday morning. I dropped by for Playcrafter Kids, who's our preschool partner that's going to be utilizing rooms in the lower level of the RE. They had about 50 families on site for their summer kickoff party, and they were not Foothills families yet is what I like to say. They're the kinds of folks who are aligned with our values, who are excited to be in our space, seeing all those kids and families playing out on our playground and knowing that we get to share space with them is really exciting, particularly to the trends that Gretchen talked about. They're a partner that is, in addition to the rental income they'll be bringing us, they were just awarded a $50,000 grant from the state for improving the space. And then they are raising another $25,000. So in total, that partnership will bring more than $100,000 to our congregation just in this first year, between improvements to the building and the rental fees. Additionally, we've been talking to a couple of theater groups that are going to do their programs with us in the fall. We are continuing our relationship with Center for Spiritual Living. We have another youth camp program through the Yoga Shack that's going to be coming in this fall. And then we continue to see some usage. This has dropped down a little bit in the last few months as we've not been able to use the building, but we have, the food bank has still been doing their event with us. We've worked with Poudre Wilderness volunteers. We've worked with, who else? Several community members. And so it's so exciting just to know that will continue to be a way that we have a stream of income to support our operations. Gretchen and I have given tours to lots of community partners, and everyone we get to share the space with is really excited. And we see there being lots of opportunities to connect with other organizations. And then additionally, I spoke in February about how important fundraising for the future is going to be. I worked with a small group of donors this spring to help fund some of the needs that I identified as to help us be more competent at fundraising, especially fundraising externally. We have historically been all internally funded. And as our work continues to be really important, especially in the justice realm, and where we are providing connection between other organizations and supporting really important work around our progressive values. We have seen interest from outside groups who we hope to be a part of how we fund going on long term. I worked with a small group to fund some software that really helps us identify folks who are in that sweet spot for us, folks who are aligned with our values, giving to the things that we work towards, and helps us to set up a conversation with those groups. And so with the support of that software and some other campaign direction that I've been working on, we have 4 different fundraising campaigns going on with varying timelines. The first one is that $60,000 summer match that I just mentioned. And then Gretchen and I have worked really thoroughly to identify what are the needs of the organization at this point. What would we do if we had more funds that would enable us to have that bigger justice impact, and are working on getting in front of some of those external folks and some folks who are newer to our community to raise about $500,000 of short-term capacity building. And then additionally, that $1 million by the end of 2024 and a larger capacity building campaign that will go out another 2.5 years. The exciting thing is that we are going through this in a way where we're able to really understand who of our new folks are folks that we can approach appropriately to participate in this work with us, and expand who the funders are beyond those of you who have been giving and continue to give generously for a long time. It's about growing the number of hands in the project versus necessarily the amount coming from the hands that are already here. And I know a lot of you will be excited to hear that. We also just found out that we got a grant from the Bohemian Foundation in support of our LGBT work, and specifically some of the work we're doing with trans youth and families. I want to thank Kelsey Diaster, who's our communications manager. She's been doing the lion's share of the work around producing grants for us. And for us to venture out into the grant world as a religious institution. Those of you who know much about the grant world, it's often the first thing that they will tell you: we won't fund you. And so it's exciting to see us building relationships, and we really feel like there's a strong opportunity within that space. We also had a great meeting with the UU funding panel, and are hopeful that we'll hear of a grant from them sometime soon, and have 4 other grants that we're applying for over the summer. The one area where we've really struggled to gain traction is the stewardship support. Y'all really don't want to be on a stewardship team. We keep asking, and I keep hearing it's too much. So we've been working with folks who've been deeply engaged in stewardship in the past with us to identify how do we make it more approachable and more accessible. I am looking for about 5 to 8 folks who are willing to step up and participate in our fall pledge drive. As Walter mentioned, the board did a huge part of this work last year, and we need some additional folks to come in. So if you have an interest, that's a short period of time from August to November. It's very directed toward renewing pledges from the past and reaching out to folks who are new to our community and helping them understand what pledging is about. I would love to have your help with that. But overall, lots of exciting things going on. We feel that the path forward is illuminated, and we're taking one step at a time. And I'm really excited to see how our upcoming grand opening is just going to further the impact of the things that we've structured prior to that. It's been my goal that we have these things in place so that as we have public view of all that we're doing over these next couple of months, we're really prepared to capitalize on that in a way that furthers the impact of our values in our community. And I think that goes back to Gretchen.
Yeah, this is me. I think I messed up your holds and sorry. I don't know what happened. I was suddenly
I
just
didn't mean this.
not working.
Okay, hello again. Okay, so I just had one last end here, which is to kind of look ahead to the second half of the year. The picture is the entryway of the new sanctuary, which I always think of as a really good metaphor for all that's, the way the architect made it is it's actually the ceiling comes down as you come towards the last bit of the entryway, so that as you go into the entryway, you really feel the expanse of what our space really is. So just that sense of what is expanding before us. So in the summer months, June to August, I think of it as in using the word preparation, as in we're preparing for that grand opening, which I would characterize in 4 different ways. The first is the summer of belonging, that belonging challenge, and really working to create and grow our culture of belonging. 2 is a new initiative we're calling All In for Our Kids, which is responding to that return and resurgence of families returning to the foothills by planning to restart our full programs for ministry for children, youth, and families, and expand them and think of it differently in terms of what they need post-pandemic. The third is to continuing to organize and equip groups and groups leaders, which many of you have been involved in this effort over the last few months, but just continuing to try to help support our groups and strengthen our groups and their connections to the church. And finally, last but not least, is the actual move-in and transition work, which is not a small task. I want to also note that we will need some extra partnership in some of this, because Jenna, who many of you have not met because she works during the week, but she's our office assistant. She reports to Jen Powell. She is going on maternity leave. So we're going to need just a little extra support. We will be reaching out, and we would love just a little help to make sure that right in the midst of that move-in, we're able to cover all the office duties as well. Okay, so that's preparation. We're kind of getting ready, preparing. Then from September to November, I'm calling that period homecoming. Amen. So that's a kind of time of homecoming reconnecting. I think of that in three major initiatives during that period. The first is the grand opening activities. That's all the stuff that Katie just went through. We'll want all ages, all hands on deck. And I know that I'm going to be personally reaching out to a lot of the folks that I haven't seen in a while and inviting them to come. I hope if any of you have folks that just haven't made their way here in a while, that you'll reach out to them and invite them to the sense of returning home. And then, so that's first, grand opening. Second is that next stages of belonging. Like, okay, yes, we did a good job of kind of launching that summer, but how do we really move towards a deeper connection and integration of newcomers, longtime members, and this new space that we're all new to? And finally, kind of going back to what Katie said, the fundraising and all of that will be in earnest at that stage, including the auction will happen during that period and the 2024 annual campaign. December and beyond, that is a major shift ahead. As we settle in and we're in our new space, it's a shift that I really want to invite you right now to start thinking about with me, which is that we have spent a very long time and a lot of resources investing in this sanctuary for Foothills. And one way that we might think about this time is as a finish line. We're at a finish line, and it is true. We should breathe a very much deserved sigh of relief, spend a lot of time thanking our building team and all those who have given financially to make all this possible. But at the same time, I want to encourage us to think of this also as the starting line. That is a new beginning, because it has been a very long time where we have felt encumbered by not having enough space for our big vision. And that just will no longer be the case. The end of the pandemic, combined with the energy that I've described us having in the first half of this year, plus the fact that fact survey shows that optimism and capacity to change are indicators of success, all means that this is a very good time for imagination and vision. I began to think about this. Not yet. I have begun to think about this by using the phrase sanctuary here and sanctuary everywhere, which isn't necessarily about our immigration ministry that we call sanctuary everywhere. It's more just my shorthand way to think about how to describe how we have built this incredible sanctuary here, which allows us in turn to better share that good news and blessing, the courageous love of our mission with more of our community and in more generous ways. I don't know about you, but I cannot wait to see what we will figure out as our next right step in that mission and vision. That's it for me today. I'm going to turn things back over to Walter.
Thank you, Gretchen. Okay, so next on the list here is the presentation and a vote on the bylaws, our new bylaws. So I'm going to turn this over to Sue Sullivan, and she's going to walk us through this. And thank you, Sue, for doing this.
You're welcome. Sorry, I'm baffled by Zoom momentarily. Go back to full screen, go to small. Okay. Nope. Wow, I am so amazed by the last half hour of presentation here. I've almost forgotten what I'm here for.
Yeah, it's been great.
Yeah. Okay. But what I am here for is to give a shortened overview of the major bylaws changes in advance of a motion to vote for adoption. So the first slide is, why do we need to update our master governing document? Can you get to that one there? Is that showing up? There we go. Okay. I'm still wrestling with my Zoom interface here, but let me see if I can get to my slides. Here we go. As Foothills has grown larger and become able to hire a larger professional staff and transition to a mission-driven congregation, we have needed to change how we divvy up the work that we do here. And we have needed to update our bylaws to reflect this new way of operating. Bylaws are a church's highest level governing document. They exist to support the functioning of the congregation – and to meet the relevant state government requirements for being a nonprofit. Bylaws also give guidance to the Board of Trustees, whose policies cannot contradict what is written in them. And they determine what decisions should be made by the congregation as a whole and what responsibilities the congregation delegates to the Board of Trustees. The next slide details how we got to this entire new set of bylaws that we are considering today. It's the culmination of 3 years of work by dozens of lay leaders, 3 successive boards of trustees, the board's governance committee, the board's endowment task force, and the dozens of congregants who attended each of the 3 town hall meetings that the board held this spring about these proposed changes. I can't overstate how much time and energy the members of the governance committee, that's Brian Woodruff, Larry Watson, Sarah Parrish, and Tim Pearson, put into their research and dialogue with the Board of Trustees about what needs to be said in our bylaws about who we are, how we operate now, and who we collectively aspire to be as a congregation. This final draft reflects the feedback the congregation has given the board over the last several months through those town halls and through emailed questions and suggestions about the proposed changes. The board revisited the language and the rationale behind each of these articles based on all that congregational feedback, and has fine-tuned the language to present this final draft to the congregation for its vote. The next slide. All right, I totally can't see Zoom, so somebody yell at me if I'm jumping ahead here. But to shorten the discussion up a bit, I'm going to hit just the most foundational changes to the bylaws and those that generated feedback or questions in these town hall meetings. And so Article 3, per the UUA's bylaws writing guidance, defines how we govern ourselves. And because we have switched from a congregation in which lay leaders manage the day-to-day option or helped to manage the day-to-day operations in place of paid staff, to a larger policy-based governance model of running things, that's the primary reason why we need to update these bylaws. Our governance language in this proposed Article 3 has been revised to accurately reflect the lines of accountability and authority that exist under our policy-based governance model. To summarize them in brief, the congregation remains the ultimate authority of the church, with the power to call a minister, dismiss a called minister, approve the annual operating budget, amend the articles of incorporation and the bylaws, which is what we're doing here today, make decisions regarding church property, and the congregation holds the sole authority to dissolve the church. Under policy-based governance, the Board of Trustees is tasked by the congregation to govern the business, property, and affairs of the congregation via written policies that are consistent with state laws, our articles of incorporation, our bylaws, and any resolutions from the membership. The board remains accountable solely to the membership of the congregation. And the senior minister is now tasked with functioning as the executive for the church, ensuring that our mission and our vision are being enacted consistent with the guidance and limitations that the board has set in its policy book. The next slide shows the major changes to Article 4, well, one of the 2. This is an article that governs membership, and 4.3 is the section that's titled Financial Support Expected of Members. We are proposing the following language: that all members of the church are required to make and fulfill a personally meaningful annual pledge or other financial contribution, or to request a financial hardship waiver via conversation with the senior minister. Our current bylaws state that all members of the church are expected to make a financial pledge and shall be encouraged to do so, and that membership privileges, including voting rights, shall not be conditioned upon any minimum financial contribution. Why are we proposing this change? There's 4 major reasons. The first one is that the UUA's bylaws writing guidance notes that active participation, financial support, and sympathy with the purposes of the congregation are generally included in UU congregations' Article 4 requirements for membership. The other large UU churches that are using policy-based governance that we researched also require financial contributions as a condition for voting membership. 2, our congregation has historically underfunded itself and been somewhat reluctant to talk about or ask each other for money, which might be showing up in the difficulty getting folks to volunteer for the stewardship work. But it also shows up in the language of our current bylaws. 3, our current vision statement, number 4, is that we each give generously and gratefully of our financial resources in ways that foster a deep ownership of the impactful work we support. This vision statement recognizes that a part of how we feel a deepening belonging in this congregation is committing ourselves to it with a financial pledge. Having a conversation with the senior minister to find other ways of creating that sense of shared ownership is the proposed alternative for members who cannot give any financial support at all. Fourth reason, one of the key responsibilities of membership is voting on the annual budget. And it felt inappropriate that members could vote on how Foothills money is spent when they are not contributing to the funding or haven't had that pastoral conversation around other ways to deepen their sense of ownership. We want to emphasize that while membership is a specific category of involvement that allows voting in congregational meetings and serving in elected lay leadership positions, it is still possible to be fully active and contributory within the congregation without being a member. And we also want to note that in the following slide, which is 4.4, termination for membership, there continues to be no grounds for termination for failure to contribute financially. Next slide is Article 4.4. Adding a process for terminating from membership someone whose behavior is disruptive enough to threaten the well-being of the congregation was an identified gap in our current bylaws and was considered an important enough process to spell out in the bylaws. Currently, our bylaws have three reasons for resignation from membership: that a member gives oral or written notification to the minister, the membership committee chair, or the church office that they're resigning. Names of people who have resigned membership shall be removed from the membership roll. Oh, and the board secretary may drop anyone from the membership roll who has moved from the area without notice to the church or leaving a forwarding address. I just realized that that's all very technical and not actually grounds for termination. It's just a description of how to do it. But we felt that we needed to identify how to, or to add that a 2/3 vote of the board could remove someone whose actions are threatening the well-being of the congregation. Next slide is Article 6, congregational meetings. We simplified our language here for the most part. We moved the section on resolutions on moral or social concerns from the bylaws to the policy book and changed the minimum number of members needed to call a special meeting from 10 members to 10% of members. The rationale for this change is that prior to policy governance, we had no place to stipulate certain governance practices, but now many of them can live in the more easily revisable Board of Trustees policy book. So we propose moving the section on resolutions of moral or social concerns from the bylaws to the policy book, along with a few other things like board committees. And then the UUA's guidance is to base any thresholds for calling a meeting or votes in meeting on a percentage of membership rather than raw numbers. That creates rules that flex with the changing size of the congregation. Next slide. So let me go back here. I'm realizing that I meant to, I've missed all the meeting chat. I'm so sorry. And I meant to ask that people submit questions in chat. I'll get to those though when I run through these
Okay,
slides.
so I'm on it.
Yeah.
Don't worry.
Okay, thank you.
Just keep doing your thing, and then we'll catch them at
I'm
that'll-
almost done. Okay. So this is Article 7, committees. And following the UA's guidance, we propose removing all committees except the nominating committee from the bylaws. because the nominating committee is a committee directly elected by the congregation. And we retained its current composition and election cycle and role as it currently is. We removed the board committees, we recommend putting them in the policy book instead. And we removed reference to the endowment committee to allow it to become a ministry finance team that will better be able to coordinate with the other stewardship teams and fundraising efforts of the church. So the rationale for this is, again, that we had elements in our current bylaws because we didn't have another place to stipulate our governance practices. And now we do have a board policy book. So committees of the board should definitely be there. And the endowment committee's existence as a standalone committee of the congregation is an artifact of our previous governance model, and it doesn't align with policy governance, which requires clear lines of accountability and authority through either the Board of Trustees or the ministry for all church activities. And after several years of congregational conversations, convening an endowment task force, and this bylaws revision work, the board has discerned that the best alignment for the endowment committee is for it to become a ministry team so that it can be integrated with the other stewardship and fundraising work of the church. And management of the endowment would be governed by board policies. The last article that had any significant changes to it is Article 9, the minister. The responsibilities subsection was amended to include a requirement that all ministers serving the congregation be in fellowship with the UUA and members in good standing of the Unitarian Universalist Ministers Association, which both reaffirms our commitment to our larger faith movement, and, as the UUA's bylaws writing guide notes, ensures that the minister meets the specific and general qualifications that the association has deemed necessary for recognition as a minister in good standing within our movement, and also a minister with good collegial relationships with other ministers reinforces healthy and vibrant ministry. The thresholds for calling and dismissing called ministers were changed to reflect the momentousness of such decisions. We are recommending a higher threshold for calling to ensure that a new called minister does not start off with significant division in the congregation about their tenure, and a lower threshold for dismissal because it is unhealthy for a congregation to live with a significant proportion of its membership unhappy with a minister. Our current bylaws lacks a specific quorum for dismissing a called minister, and since this would be such a momentous decision in the life of our congregation, we felt that raising the quorum from our general congregational meeting requirement of 10% to 25% of membership was appropriate. Okay, so those are the major changes to the bylaws. We actually had a much bigger presentation at our various town halls, but I'm trying to respect everyone's time here. So,
Sue, there's just one question which I think you can answer before we get into official motion land,
great.
which Lottie asked about the change of the word affiliated in our relationship with the UUA.
Okay.
And what the reasoning was for that question. Change.
Right. We affiliated was not as strong a statement as being a member. We had previously said affiliated, but membership means that we are contributing our fair share to the UUA and financially supporting the larger association of congregations and supporting the movement, the larger movement as well. So that was a strengthening of that commitment to the global Unitarian Universalist movement.
Okay, so sorry, Rory jumped on me. So this is actually a higher commitment to a national organization, not a lower.
Yes.
Cool. That's all. I was just very confused. That's awesome. Thank you, Sue. This seems like a ton of hard work.
Oh, thank you. A lot of people did it.
There's one more, which I actually think I'm going to try to answer if it's okay, Sue. It's from
Okay.
Lisa Stroyan, and she's just offering 2 comments. She's saying, I'm curious about what the board policy describes as a prolonged period of inactivity and if there's a process to communicate. Let me start with that one, which is, I think it's the new bylaws are requiring that the board policy describe inactivity. And so that the board has drafted policies related to what that means. You can check that out on the board policies, but just know that we imagine a pretty long period of implementation through this entire process that will help inform people what this is asking. And we always, every year, literally, and all the time, but at the end of each year, we always, as staff and as part of, and in partnership with lay leaders, reach out to people who've been inactive and invite them to re-engage and invite them to, and then ask them if they want to continue membership or not. And if somebody says yes, and they want to continue, that would be a good indicator of their desired continued engagement. It just is a way of making sure that it's clear that we expect people who are members to be active in their membership, which doesn't mean that they can't participate if they're not members. Lots of people participate that are not members, actually, probably about equal numbers of members and non-members. The second part is, I saw the part about the senior minister hiring the assistant minister, but couldn't find it in the bylaws, anything about hiring, only dismissing. I want to clarify, I think you might mean associate, but I'm not sure, because assistant minister is a hired position. It's like all other staff. And so it's hired by, follows all the same protocols as ours and doesn't relate to the bylaws. But an associate minister is a called position that would be called by the congregation. And I think in that case, it would follow the exact same bylaws as any other minister, that this thing that she has about the dismissing any ministers. So I think, and Sue, maybe you want to add to that, but that's my.
I was talking about the assistant minister, just that in the summary, it said that it now gives, that it's not listed in the bylaws. It's not spelled out. So
Got it. Yeah, it's
just
not
a
at
missing
all.
bit.
Yeah, so I think it's just missing, you're missing a sentence and that's Sue,
Yeah.
but it's just basically all it does, Lisa, is it moves that role from bylaws to more aligned with staffing, which an assistant minister is a staff position.
Thank you.
Yes, I would add that the whole of Article 9 really defines the different types of ministers that our church engages with, from senior to called, associate to assistant to interim. It didn't go into that level of detail. Maybe I should have, but this is, again, an artifact of when the Board of Trustees was kind of helping to run the operations of the church, and they had that responsibility to hire an assistant minister, and that properly belongs under the senior minister as the staff, as an at-will staff position. A called minister has a deep and direct connection with the congregation as a whole. And for folks who were here and remember when we called Sean, there was a lengthy period of discernment and a vote and a celebration and a religious ceremony of, I forget the name of it, but it was wonderful. Installation, thank you. I wanted to go induction, but that was way too dry. Installation, and it represents a much deeper and more enduring relationship, being a called minister. So anyway, are there any other sort of clarifying questions? Because any sort of further discussion, I think we can hold off until we ask Doug Powell, who represents the governance committee as the board's former liaison to it. Doug would make a motion, and then we could open it up for discussion after that. Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
so
ready?
I'm turning it over to Doug now.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. With great pleasure, I move to approve the revised bylaws as included in the congregational packet as a full replacement of our existing bylaws.
Okay, excellent. So thank you. Of course, no second is necessary because this comes from committee, and the motion is not open for debate. Do we have anybody who has something they'd like to say? Okay, so first of all, I really want to thank you, Sue, for the work that you did in bringing this to the final line. And of course, all the people before you, been excellent. So this puts us now into a position, since there is no comments on this, is I am going to call the question. And so the motion before you is, do we approve the revised bylaws as included in the congregational packet as a full replacement of our existing bylaws? Please vote.
Remember, this is the part where you often all get confused. If you don't have somebody in your needing to vote second, you just need to say no second voter and then submit your vote.
I think we're learning. This looks a little easier to understand.
I know,
so-
it's coming along. Okay, and the other point is, if you have more than 2 in your room, just please submit your third one in the chat. And if for some reason you have any trouble with voting, just submit it in the chat.
Gretchen, is there any particular person that that should be aimed to in the chat so that they get tallied correctly?
I would say Katie, but Katie and I are sharing a login right now, so maybe we'll say to you, Chris, parliamentarian dash Chris Hutchins.
Yeah, if you have any extra votes that need to be tallied, and then I'll send them off to Katie.
Thanks. Okay, I think we did it. So here's I think I have the results. They seem to have stopped coming in. So I'm going to say that the motion passes with, I think I have, sorry, it's confusing with the second voter, but I think I have at least 99% yeses. So that seems like a resounding approval. I'm sorry, I don't have the official yes, no, but I will we'll report it in the notes, but it is definitely at least 99%. It's at least 66 yeses.
Great. Awesome. Okay. The motion passes.
Woohoo!
Thank you, everyone.
It's beautiful and only took us like 10 years of discernment. So thank you all.
It was a process. Yes. And let me tell you, there are a lot of board members present and past that have worked many hours on this. So thank you. It really shows that you folks have really looked this over carefully and been to the town meetings if you've had some considerations on it, and to know that we took all your comments to heart and made changes as appropriate. So thank you again. Okay. All right. So now we're on to the election of the slate of nominees. So we have this is the election of the 23-24 slate of nominees for the Board of Trustees. We have Mary Kleekin. She is going to be president-elect, a 3-year term. So she'll be president-elect for 1 year and then president for 2 years. Beth Adams, a trustee for 3-year term. John Hill, a trustee for 3-year term. And Sue Bloomfield, a trustee for 2-year term, filling a vacancy. She's already filled a year. And for nominating committee, we have Cheryl Hazlitt, which is wonderful. Okay. So let's see, moving on to our final vote of the meeting, the slate of candidates. And
so
again,
we need to nominate the nominating committee to move to approve the slate.
Yes, exactly. So since the motion comes from the committee, no seconds required. Do we have a motion from the nominating committee to approve this slate of nominees for 23-24?
We do. The nominating committee is happy to present the 2023 slate of candidates to the congregation. All of them are really highly qualified and we believe able to make significant contributions to the work ahead. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Susan. Okay, is there any discussion or questions about this slate of nominees? Okay, it appears like as though we are ready to call the vote. I do call the question. The motion before you is, do we approve this slate of nominees for 23-24? Please vote.
Okay, I'm gonna just go ahead and say this passes with at least 99%. It's the second, I'll just tell you, the second question comes up and some of you answer it in creative ways. And so it's confusing what you intended, but just assuming even if we just go with the straight up yeses, we're at 99%. So I'm gonna say this passes.
Fantastic. Okay. Welcome, new nominees. We appreciate your time and efforts, and thank you for the nominating committee for your work in qualifying our nominees. Okay, closing remarks. It's been a long day, very productive one. I appreciate your time again. Boy, I had some things I wanted to say, and I pretty much tossed them out. I just want to say that I was at the Sunday service today, and I was really taken. I love seeing new members coming in, and the little oath that we take, and the back and forth between the congregation and the leaders and the new members. And then I really realized that we are really in a state of change right now, big time. We are now coming to a point where we have a new sanctuary coming into place. There are a lot of eyes looking at us. There's a lot of people out there, families, individuals. We live in a world right now that is pretty divisive, and it doesn't take a genius to figure that out. And there are people who just don't know that we exist. And I'm really happy that this is an opportunity for us. And I'm just want to call your help. I need your help. So when new people are coming in and you see them, I need you to express that courageous love that we've all been talking about. And that means to be that person, the first person to go and talk to the new individual or the new family, because they are looking for community. They are looking for peace. They are looking for love. And we have something that they may be wanting. So this is a benefit for everyone, because the more people we have in our group, the bigger our voice, the more impact we can have. I'm very happy with our leadership. I'm thrilled to be a member. I'm honored to be the president right now when this is all occurring. So thank you very much, and I'm looking forward to your assistance. And that's it. So we're adjourned. Thank you.